Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Lauren with the Coffee Cake Quilt Company, and today I'd like to show you our brand new pattern. This is for a little coffee or tea mug rug. We've got a cute little cup here with the heart for Valentine's Day, or if you're like me and you just love hearts all year round. And then we've got a little place here to rest your spoon, or if you have some like little crimpets or cookies or tea cakes or something little, you can put that over here. It is 6.5 inch by 9.5 inch. Here's the back. And if you're interested in making this, stick around for the tutorial and also check out the pattern on www.coffeecakequiltcompany.com. For the Latte Love mug rug pattern, you'll need your backing fabric, your batting, your binding, your side fabric, your cup fabric, your heart fabric, and your background. Next, I chose this light pink Gutermann thread here. I'm going to do the top quilting with that, and then I'm going to use white to piece. Next, I have this felt tip marker here, and I can go ahead and link a lot of these items down below that I'm using, but I have this felt tip marker here when I like to do half square triangles, especially when I like to do them in 2s or 4s at a time. In this particular instance, I'm going to show you how to piece the triangles to make a half square triangle on the bias instead, just because I have a directional print. But if you don't have a directional print, feel free to follow the pattern instructions exactly, because I do have making 2 at a time half square triangles in the pattern instructions. And then I also have a rotary cutter here. I have a marker, and I'll show you why I have this Sharpie here, this fine tip Sharpie, and then I also have my Bernina scissors that I carry with me everywhere because I love them so much. And then I also have a couple rulers here. So I have these block locks. These are actually for squaring up your half square triangles. And then I have a regular 2.5 inch square ruler here, because if you don't have the block locks, you can also use one of these. And then I like to have this 1 inch by 6 inch ruler handy as well for small projects like this, because sometimes you have to square up after you've pieced if you don't have the sides and things matching up correctly. I like to square up as I go. Next, I want to show you how I have these labeled. I don't have the alphabet-y single letters that I've seen other quilters use, but instead I just take these inexpensive quilt clips from Amazon, and I go ahead and take that Sharpie that I showed you earlier, and I just make the letter on this quilt clip, and then it rubs away with friction, but you can also use rubbing alcohol, or you can also use a baby wipe if that helps, or even a microfiber towel creates enough friction to remove that. You also need some kind of iron and ironing board. Here I have a wool pressing mat and my Oliso mini iron. Additionally, it goes without saying, but you'll also need a sewing machine, and I'd like to just preface that by saying you do not have to have an expensive sewing machine in order to complete this project. My very first sewing machine that I ever used for quilting was a $300 Brother machine from Walmart. It was amazing. It lasted me for, I mean, it's still working, so I guess it's lasted me for 10 years, and now it's actually my daughter's. So please do not feel like you have to have expensive equipment to do this. Please do not feel like you have to purchase expensive fabric in order to make this pattern. Joann's fabric is quite fine. I'm going to deviate a little bit from the pattern instructions here and start off with my half square triangles. Here I have my cup fabric, I have my background fabric, and then I have my heart fabric. I did go ahead and choose this directional print for my heart fabric, which left me with a little bit of a conundrum. I would have been able to make 2 half square triangles out of 2 squares like this, which would have been nice because I have 6 of these little guys, so I could have just done this 3 times and then resulted with 6. Instead, now I have to go through and actually sew half square triangles together in the traditional way here. So I'll go ahead and show you how I do that. And for those of you who don't understand what I'm talking about, so for instance, this is going to be the top of one side of my heart. And so if I would have used this fabric, which was the other cut of, say, this piece, and I turned it on its side, now my hearts are going horizontally. Or conversely, if I had it going this way with this piece, now my hearts are upside down. So in that sense, I actually had to cut these blocks out in a square and then go ahead and cut them diagonally and then arrange them in the correct orientation. And I did have a little bit of scrap I had 4 scrap pieces as well that I think I'll actually make a little mug rug for myself. I don't really care if it's going the right way, but this is actually going to be a gift for somebody. So I definitely want it to be going the correct way. So just be conscious of the orientation of your fabric when you're doing this mug rug. So here we're going to be making 2 half square triangles from these 2 squares. So what you want to do is take your cup fabric and place it pretty sides down against your back fabric, or sometimes you can say right sides down, that's what the pattern calls for. And then you're going to go ahead and take your ruler, and I like to use this felt tip pen, like I said, by Papermate. It is washable as well, but I like to go ahead and just run lightly down the back there. Now you can see this line, and I'm gonna go ahead and sew a 1/4 inch on one side and then a 1/4 inch down this way on the other side. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut this line down the middle, and I'll have 2 half square triangles that I can then trim up. The next step I'm going to do is take the bottom of my heart and pretty sides together, line up those edges of my triangles. I'm gonna try to do this the best I can with my fingers being the way that they are. And then go ahead and do that to the other side here. And then same thing for this one, I'm going to sew down a 1/4 inch here for my seam allowance. And then when I go ahead and press this open, I'm going to then go ahead and trim off the excess, and I'll have 2 half square triangles for my pattern. Next, I'm going to do the top part of my heart. So I've got my triangles lined up here in the orientation that they should be sewn. So I'm going to do pretty side to pretty side for each one of these half square triangles. And then I'll go ahead and sew them together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance as well. So let me go ahead and get started on this. So here I am at my machine, and the first thing I want to do actually is bring this needle over so that I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance starting over here at the edge of the foot. So my particular machine moves over by 4. And then I'm going to go ahead and try it out. Did one too many. I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that that's a 1/4 inch, which it is. Let's go ahead and start with our leader first. This is just a small piece of fabric that gets the machine going. Okay, and then like I said, we're going to go ahead and sew a 1/4 inch away from this line that we drew down this square to make our 2 half square triangles. So we'll do that, and then we'll come back around and do that again on the other side. I just want to go ahead and chain stitch some of these things together so that I don't have to keep pulling it away from the machine. All right, we've got our first half square triangle here. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a 1/4 inch seam allowance for this. I'm going to repeat this process for the 4 half square triangles for the top of your heart. I'm going to raise my presser foot. Go ahead and use that. And then I have this handy little cutter here that I like to use in order to cut these pieces apart. This was something I purchased on Amazon, so I'll go ahead and link that below. I think Fat Quarter Shop may have it too. There we go. And I'll save my leader fabric on the side here for the next round. So let's go ahead and get these trimmed up. Okay, so here I have my half square triangles that we just sewed, as well as this block that we're gonna go ahead and separate. As you can see, there are 2 stitches here, a 1/4 inch away from that line that we drew. So let's get started on this one first. We're going to take that small ruler that I had here, line it up with that pink line, and just zip right down the middle. Here are half square triangles that we just did. First, we're gonna go ahead and press them open, and then we're gonna go ahead and I'll show you how to trim them up in 2 ways. If you followed Missouri Star or Jenny Donut All, you will know to press to the dark side is what Jenny likes to say. So in this case, the red is my dark side. So I'm gonna go ahead and press to the dark side. And I will say, I am not a stickler for pressing any which direction. I actually just do what makes sense as I go along through my quilt pattern. My memory card actually just got full, so I had to delete a whole bunch of stuff, but let's go ahead and pick up where we were. We're going to go ahead and press open the seams of our half square triangles, the dark side for now, and then as our pattern progresses here, there are times where that just won't work out when we're lining up seams. So we'll go ahead and do this for now. There are all different ways to iron. People tell you to go ahead and set the seam first, and then go ahead and open your seam and press. Whatever you feel comfortable with or what your skill level is, it's not a big deal. It all sews up the seam. I forgot to add, when you're sewing on the bias like we just did with these triangles, you want to make sure not to stretch your fabric. So next I'll show you how to trim these half square triangles down. There's two different methods that you could use that I know of personally, and one is using a block lock roller like this. If you can see, it has this little channel here, so it actually snags onto that fold that you just created with the with sewing that seam. So this is a 1.25 inch half square triangle. So we want to go ahead and line this up on, this is 1.5 inch ruler. So we want to go ahead and line that up on the 0.25 over here to subtract from the 1.5, and then again down here on the 1.25, which is right there. And then you'll just go ahead and trim off that excess in both directions. Okay, and we're still not done because we have this dog ear here, so you're going to want to turn it around a complete 180 and get it from the other side. So you'll go ahead and line it up again. Okay, this is tough to do with such small half square triangles, so I get it, believe me. And then just get that little dog ear off. All right, and now we have a perfect half square triangle. And I'm gonna go ahead and repeat that process for the rest, but let me go ahead and show you that other method I was talking about if you don't have those block lock rollers, which by the way are very expensive, I'm not gonna lie. But I will go ahead and link them down in the description box below as well if you do want to try those out. But here, if you just grab, this is a 2.5 inch squared ruler from Fiskars. I got this at Joann's. It actually came with this mat. But if you just go ahead and take your half square triangle, you have this diagonal line here. You're gonna go ahead and match it up to the same thing I said. You have 1.25 is how big this block should be, so 1.25. I like to trim it up from both sides because I like to make sure that I have equal distances here. So I'm gonna go ahead and line that diagonal up here on my seam. And like I said, I'm gonna just come away just a little bit from the 1.25 mark because I wanna do it to the other side as well. And then you're gonna go ahead, hold that down with a steady hand and cut the excess. And then you'll come at it from the other side here as well, but this time on your second pass, you are going to line it up on the 1.25 line on both sides here. I know it's hard because you have that seam there and it kind of pushes. Just do your best. I know these are small half square triangles. There you go. So now we have our second perfectly lined up half square triangle. So it really doesn't matter what method you choose. They both work the exact same way. A lot of people say that they don't like trimming up half square triangles, and I have to admit it is definitely not my favorite either. But as a long armor, I can tell you I totally know when my customers don't square up their half square triangles because there's a lot of bulk when I'm trying to quilt through all those layers. All right, there we go. We've got all of our little half square triangles and we're ready to start piecing the rest of our mug rug. All right, let's go ahead and sew our heart together. We have K, M, and then we also have our J and N fabric. We're gonna sew this one to this one, this one to this one, this one to this one, and then we're going to sew these closed And then we're gonna go ahead and sew these 4 to these 2. Yes, I did go ahead and change the orientation of how I iron them. One is going this direction and the other is going the opposite direction. That's because I want to go ahead and nest these seams when I stitch. I'm going to go ahead and stitch our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that I've sewn the half square triangles together, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and sew down the middle of this one, and then I'm going to go ahead and join both pieces. Here I have the top and bottom of my heart. So here I have the seams going in opposite directions. I want to go ahead and nest these seams the whole way down, and sew a 1/4 inch down the side here. The heart piece is now complete for my cup. I just want to make sure that it measures out correctly. If not, I need to trim it down to size and then keep going. Now that we've finished trimming up the heart, we're going to go ahead and place our H blocks on both the top and the bottom with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Next, I'm going to sew the cup handle. So here we have our I pieces of fabric, our G piece of fabric, our L, and then we have those half square triangles we made with C and K. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this piece to this piece, and then this piece to this piece, this piece to this piece, and this piece to this piece, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew them together down the middle with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now my seam is actually facing the direction of my needle, and so what's going to happen is my needle is actually going to pull that seam back. So I just like to use the end of my scissors here, but you can also use any other kind of pointing device. I have the 2 pieces of my handle. I'm going to go ahead and sew a 1/4 inch seam down the center. And once again, I am nesting the seams. Now that we have our handle block stitched together and trimmed up, we want to go ahead and add our E block to the top and our D block to the bottom. Now that we have our heart unit done, as well as our handle unit, we want to go ahead and join them together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just want to check here that my handle is going to match up correctly with the bottom of the one piece. Once you have your cup complete, you're going to want to add your side pieces here. This is fabric F to both sides, and then A to the top and B to the bottom. As you'll see here, my block actually measures 6 3/8 instead of 6 1/2. So what I'm actually going to do is just make sure that it's squared up. And then because this part measures 6 1/2, I'm just going to go ahead and sew it anyway, and then I'll go ahead and trim it to size later, and then just account for that when I go ahead and put my backing on and my binding. It'll just be a little bit smaller than the dimensions that the pattern calls for. Okay, now that we have our mug rug top complete, we're gonna go ahead and place it on top of a piece of batting. Now I did make this batting just slightly larger so that when we go ahead and quilt, we won't run into any issues. So there's that. And then you're gonna go ahead and place your backing fabric wrong side up here so that you create your sandwich. And same thing, I made this back fabric just slightly bigger than my quilt top, or I guess my mug rug top as well. I'll go ahead and put this together a little bit nicer when I have two free hands. But also what I wanted to say is just make sure that you have your batting going in the correct direction. It is difficult to tell, but there is a top and a back to some battings. This one is warm and natural, and you can always tell the back. One, it doesn't have that variegation like you see on the front here of these little specks. I don't know if that's scrim or what that is, maybe just parts of the cotton. But you'll also see that the back is just slightly nappier. It has a little bit of a loft to it. If you're using something like Quilter's Dream Batting, which is what I use for the quilts that I long arm for people, that actually doesn't have a front and a back. Same with wool. Okay, here we go. This is ready to quilt on my domestic machine. What I'm gonna do is just a really simple cross hatch. If I had more fingers, I would probably do something, maybe, you know, some swirls or maybe echo around this cup, and then do something really cute over here. But for right now, we're just gonna keep it a simple cross hatch. And then I don't typically use pins. You'll see me sewing often without pins. However, I did already do a trial of this. It's actually right here. It's super cute. I'm gonna give that one away too. But I did a trial of it, and this just moved around way too much on me with my Bernina. This is actually the first time I've quilted on my Bernina domestic machine. I used to free motion quilt actually on my Brother, which is why I love Brother so much. It's so versatile. But anyway, so let's go ahead and get this quilted up. To begin my crosshatch, I'm just gonna go ahead and sew diagonally here across this corner. But first, I actually wanna move my needle the whole way to the left because I'm gonna be using the edge of this foot as a guide for how far apart I'm going to be doing my crosshatch. So let me go ahead and get started. Now there may be an easier way instead of always tying off and tying on, but this is just how I've done it forever, and I'm not going to change my ways now. But yeah, there might be an easier way for going from one side to the other, but this is how I'm going to do it. As you can see, here are my stitches, and I have the edge of my foot here on the stitch. So I'm just going to follow this down the entire way while sewing. All right, so here we go. I've done one diagonal, and I think I'm actually just gonna keep it like that instead of doing the cross hatch like I was talking about. So now my next step would be to trim this up to the size that it should be. See, my backing is bigger, my batting is bigger, so just trim it up to my quilt top here round. And then I wanna go ahead and make my binding. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and trim this up here. Just trim off that excess batting and backing here. All right, I went ahead and trimmed up my mug rug here. As you can see, there is a little bit of batting showing here as well as here. I just wanted to ensure that I had a completely squared up mug rug, so that's showing, but it's okay because it's actually going to get covered up with my binding, which is a 1/4 inch sewn along the outside here. So let me go ahead and get that binding made up. Here we have our strip. We're gonna go ahead and fold in half the long ways. And you want to go down the entire length of the strip. This one happens to be the width of fabric, so about 44 inches. It looks like I didn't entirely cut off the selvage here. That's okay. That's actually going to get cut off at the end. Before I get started here, I want to make sure that this needle is a 1/4 inch away from the edge of my presser foot here. Now when I attach the binding, I actually like to start at the very bottom of my project. All right, I'm gonna start a little ways away here. Here's the edge, the corner edge of my mug rug. I'm gonna start sewing maybe about 1.5 inches away, just because I wanna do a special binding technique that I learned a couple months ago that I really enjoy, and I really need extra space, especially when you're working with something small like a mug rug. So I'm just gonna sew a 1/4 inch seam the whole way around, using that foot as my guide. And then I'm gonna go ahead, I don't know if you can see, but I'm gonna go ahead and bring my needle very close to that corner. I actually like to come just before the corner, just to make sure that I end up with a really nice point there. I'm gonna back stitch. And then when doing the corner here of my binding, I'm just gonna go ahead and bring this up. Here, I'll try to show you this way. I'm gonna go ahead and bring the binding up until I feel a little bit of a tug here, and this side here, this side here is parallel with the edge of my project. And once I have it pretty parallel, I'm gonna go ahead and just bring that down. So what's gonna happen is you have the fold here flush with the top of your project, and then you have the side flush with the side of your project, and then you have, I don't know if you can see it, but you have this fold neatly parallel and in line with this side. So you're gonna go ahead and sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance here on the edge. And we're gonna go the whole way down. We're gonna stop about 1/4 inch. Like I said, I'm gonna come in on a diagonal just before that corner. Here we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna bring this binding up parallel with the side here. Once again, so that this fold that you're creating over here is parallel with the right side. And then you're gonna come back down to make sure that the top of your binding fold here is flush against this top corner as well as the side. Okay, I'm happy with that. Okay, and I didn't say before, but what I like to do is I like to start about 1/4 inch in as well, and then backstitch to the edge. I'm gonna come within about 1/4 inch here away from the edge. There we go. Once again, I'm gonna go ahead and sew here diagonally just before the corner turns there on my project. Pull up. Do you see here on my corner how I've left about 1/8 inch before coming in? I'll go diagonally, but I don't do straight to the corner. And that's because if you sew straight to that corner edge there, you're actually gonna have a difficult time when you go to turn the corner here of your binding. It's gonna get caught up on the edge here, and it's not gonna look great. So what I'm gonna do when I sew this final edge here is I'm not gonna come in too much because I wanna go ahead and do a special binding technique on it, and I know that I'm gonna need some space. So I'm gonna go ahead and just backstitch prematurely here, and then we're gonna finish this up seamlessly. Okay, so the way I'm gonna finish up this binding here on this little mug rug, I'm gonna go ahead and just snip some of the binding off. Okay, I'm gonna open it up so that I have the 2.5 inch width binding here. You can see 2.5 inches. I'm gonna hold this open. All right, I've got both sides of my binding here from the bottom and the top. And what I wanna go ahead and do is find about the middle here. You see how it's attached here and here? I'll probably end up putting this right about here. Okay, so I'll go ahead and lay my bottom strip down there, line it up with the 2.5 inch strip. Go ahead and bring this one down. Okay, and so right here at the bottom where it meets up, I'm gonna go ahead and just trim this off. Okay, just like that. And then I already have this trimmed to be exactly what I needed it to be. The bottom binding is already flush with this cut that I have. And so all I need to do is just bring this top binding down to be flush with the bottom. And so now this will leave us with a perfect binding here to make this seam. I'm gonna open this up here. So pretty side facing up. I'm gonna go ahead and also open this one up. Okay, so that when I put these together, they're gonna come around and be seamless. This is a little bit tricky, especially on such a small project. It's actually a lot easier on a quilt. But we're gonna go ahead and bring these edges together just as if we were sewing binding together, binding strips together. I'm gonna try to do this the best way possible here. Just make sure that everything is wrinkle free. Okay, I think I have that pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and take my ruler and just mark this the whole way down. Okay. All right, so as you can see, I have this marked now, and I'm gonna go ahead and sew down on this line. All right, I just went and gave that a quick press, but as you can see, we have this perfect union here of the strip of binding on both sides. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and continue on my 1/4 inch the whole way down until I meet the end here, and then we're gonna flip this over and sew our binding down. The next step I like to do when sewing my binding on is to go ahead and just give it a really good press here along the edges, and then that helps to ensure a really nice finish. Saw something I wanted to trim off. Where did it go? I really like to have a clean looking project here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and snip some of these excess threads. Okay, so the next step would be to start turning over the binding here to the other side. And for this, I am going to use clips. So I'm gonna just go ahead and start folding this over. And I just kind of double check to make sure that when I go to sew here in the ditch, stitch in the ditch, that I'm gonna have enough coverage here on the back where the binding meets. And that should be more than enough. So I'm just gonna go ahead and clip that. And when I come to the corner here, I'm gonna go ahead and I kind of just poke to make sure that's through. Go ahead and hold this corner down. As you can see, I have a little bit of a flap here, and then that flap is gonna come down, and I try to meet it at a diagonal here, as you can see with the other side. And then I'm gonna go ahead and give that a nice clip too. And then I'm just gonna continue working my way around, bringing that binding to the other side. And since we already ironed the front side, it just makes it really easy. So once again, I'm gonna come through here. I'm going to go the whole way up until I have this little kind of dog ear, I guess. And then I'm gonna go ahead and bring it down. And like I said, I'm gonna meet it up so that I have this nice little envelope corner here. Great. There we go. We are now ready to sew on the binding. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stitch in the ditch the entire way around, hoping to catch the back of this binding here. And then our mug rug will be done. I went ahead and put on this kind of binding helper tool that I have. I'm really not sure what this is exactly called. If you know, please put it in the comments below. But this is part of my Bernina B770 Quilters edition, and it just helps me hold this binding in place so it doesn't slip out. Basically what happens is as you have pressure from the foot as you're sewing the binding on, sometimes it pushes this fabric out to the point where on the other side your fabric is no longer catching, and then you've got some issues and you have to go back and do some rework. So I'm trying to avoid that the best way possible. So let's go ahead and stitch in the ditch the entire way around to sew our binding on. Okay, when you come to the corner, you're going to turn. Okay, I have this thread here on front. I'm just gonna bring that to the back here. I meant to leave a little bit more of a tail so I could have buried the thread, but you know what? It's back stitched on there pretty good. I don't think it's gonna be coming off, but I just wanna bring this thread to the back here and maybe give it a quick knot if I can. So like I said, normally I would tuck this in with a needle. I've showed those on my top 12 quilting items that I like to have on hand. There you have it. There's our completed mug rug. As you can see on the other side, our binding is absolutely perfect. It's perfect the entire way around. I'm very happy with that. All the corners match up. The front looks phenomenal. I'm very happy with the stitch in the ditch. There's a little bit here where you can see, but other than that, I did a pretty good job stitching in the ditch. Let's see, I've got a cup, and if I had a spoon or some kind of little treat, I could put it here on the side. It's the perfect size, 6.5 by 9.5. And just a reminder, if you'd like to get this pattern, go ahead and head over to www.coffeecakequiltcompany.com. It is available in PDF format. You can print it out, you can hole punch it, put it in your binder. All right, well, that's it for our video today. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy seeing these tutorials, and also please put in the comments down below what you think of this cute little mug rug if you'd like to see more content like this. We do enjoy making patterns for you all, and there are definitely more to come in the works. So thank you so much for watching. We will see you next time. Bye.